Accused CEO killer Luigi Mangione was back in a Manhattan courtroom today as his lawyers tried to get key evidence thrown out before any trial even begins. His defense team says Mangione's backpack, his notebook, his silencer, and the 3D printed handgun were all seized without a search warrant. And they accused police of questioning him without reading him his Miranda rights. It was nearly a year ago today that Mangione allegedly shot and killed UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a busy street in Midtown Manhattan, New York City. After a massive manhunt, Mangione was arrested 5 days later in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. New surveillance video and a 911 call from that McDonald's was played in court today. It reveals just how chaotic and shocking that moment was when customers trying to enjoy their Egg McMuffins noticed something odd. NewsNation's Jessica Kartalija is live outside the Manhattan courthouse. Jessica, what have we seen in this brand new surveillance video, and what did we hear in that new 911 call?
Well, it's pretty incredible, Elizabeth. The judge called 5 witnesses today and then showed that new evidence. They're expected to call as many as 40 witnesses over the next few days. All of this as the defense argues to get that key piece of evidence, that backpack, thrown out so it's inadmissible in court. That key piece of evidence, the first piece that we're going to talk about, was the surveillance video. It's not being released publicly. It's from Mangione inside of the McDonald's where he was arrested. The reason why we can't share that video tonight is because the judge still hasn't ruled as to whether it will be admissible. The video shows him in a tan beanie, a black jacket, and a blue mask, sitting alone. He wipes down a table, and then he eats calmly for almost an hour as customers came and went. Officers then approach him just before 9:30 in the morning and then take him into custody about 20 minutes later. The court also played the 911 call where a nervous McDonald's manager quietly describes him after customers notified her that they recognized him. She lists what he was wearing, and she notes that only his eyes and his eyebrows were visible behind a medical mask. At one point, you can even hear a bagel order coming in the background, showing just how routine that morning seemed before police arrived. The defense will argue that the officers overstepped during that arrest at that McDonald's and that their search was unconstitutional. Arresting officers, we're told, may take the stand while the judge determines whether or not that backpack should stay in as evidence or whether it should be thrown out. Elizabeth, legal experts say that the ruling could have major consequences on the prosecution's case because if he suppresses some of that evidence, it may weaken the narrative that prosecutors hope to present in that trial. As to whether or when that trial will begin, that remains to be seen. That's something else the judge will hopefully rule on if both sides can come to an agreement.
All right. Jessica Kartalija, thank you so much. With us with more is NewsNation's legal contributor, Jesse Weber. Okay, so this is the state court, not the federal court. There are 2 different jurisdictions trying to prosecute Luigi Mangione, state and feds. And here in the state court, these defense attorneys want basically the majority of the case tossed. I mean, that's everything, the so-called manifesto or the notebook of writings.
So whatever he said to law enforcement in the McDonald's, what was ever found in that backpack, gun, magazine, the notebook, by the way, the notebook with the writings that go strictly to the intent factor of murder. And then they also want to try to bar statements that he potentially made or allegedly made to corrections officers.
So it's 3 different things.
3 different things.
Let's deal with them one by one.
And let me just say, yes, the ruling of the state court will not completely bind a federal court. He has a hearing in January in the federal case, but I have to say, if a judge comes out and says his rights were violated and this evidence should be tossed in the state case, I think it's going to be very difficult for a federal judge to disagree. Now, here's what I think. There's an argument here that when they surrounded him, allegedly surrounded him, law enforcement in the McDonald's, the question was, did he believe he was in custody? If he thought he was in custody, if he thought he couldn't leave, even though there was testimony that he was still eating chicken nuggets or something as he was talking
Right, but
to law
they're
enforcement,
surrounding him.
then he had to have had his Miranda rights read. And if he didn't,
And they weren't.
They weren't read for 20 minutes. Now, the counter argument would be,
Why did they talk to him for 20 minutes without Mirandizing him?
there's a thing in the law, if they had reasonable suspicion that there was criminal activity, it's a very low standard, they can do just it's more of a non-formal detention, ask him questions. Where I say it gets complicated, Elizabeth, is when he allegedly handed over the fake ID with Mark Rosario. As soon as they ran that ID and they saw it was fake or allegedly fake, you could say that's criminal activity. And then you combine that with the big thing. When did they check the bag? If they checked the bag after they ran the ID, I think the prosecutors have a slam dunk case that all of that evidence should come in, because the argument would be it's incidental to this. They thought that, by the way, now this might be the shooter. They're checking to see if there might be weapons in there, a bomb. I think they have a strong argument, but maybe some of the statements that he made would not be allowed in.
So are you saying anybody who hands over a fake ID has lost all right? Like, I'm thinking of every high school kid.
Well, not every high school
across
kid.
The country.
Well, here's the difference. Why did they spend so much time talking about the images that were circulated around the country? Because if this and the 911 phone call came in, if people reasonably believed that, oh my gosh, the UnitedHealthcare shooter is here, matches the description. I believe there was testimony that was one person who was afraid to approach him, then you're seeing that they might have reasonable grounds to believe that this is in fact a dangerous murder suspect. And that, coupled with the fake ID and coupled with whatever else he might have said, they might have said something's amiss here. We have reason to believe that.
How do you think the judge is going to rule?
I think the judge has to be very careful here. There's a possibility, first of all, that at the end of this hearing, which will last several days, may have a ruling, may take some time. I think there's a possibility that some statements may not be allowed in, but the backpack evidence, I think that will be allowed in. I personally do, but we'll see. I could be wrong.
Holy cow, that would be a blockbuster ruling if this judge tosses it.
There's still a case, right? Even if that gets tossed, there's surveillance footage, forensics, but that's a key to the prosecution's case.
Yeah, okay. Jesse Weber, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.